Okay, everybody, welcome to another edition of RSG Insider. I'm your host, Jim Simon. I'm a principal with RSG. And today I'm with my colleague, Carol Ieromnimon. She is an associate with RSG. She's recently joined the firm. We're really excited to have her with us today. She's got a ton of background in the particular type of work that we're going to get into and talk about today called LAFCOs and Municipal Service Reviews, which sounds very cryptic, and we're going to hopefully make it a little bit less vague by the end of the day. So I'm really excited for Carol to be here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Carol Ieromnimon. I am a new associate with RSG. Prior to joining the wonderful RSG team, I worked for the San Diego County LAFCO as an analyst for almost 3 years. There, I also participated and served on the Cal LAFCO Legislative Committee as an advisory member. I also have been part of their planning committee for those almost 3 years. And I also sat as an advisory member for SANDAG's working group, Southern Communities Working Group. And before that, I did work for a nonprofit organization. I was a contract program administrator looking over their grant programs, and this was with Grow America. They're formerly known as National Development Council.
Wow. So yeah, and I'm just really grateful that you decided to come to RSG and join us here. So we're going to talk about, as I said, LAFCOs, LAFCO. And it's a form of government that very few people are aware of. So how would you describe it to someone like my mom who probably doesn't know what I do for a living still? And how would you describe what that is?
Yeah, so LAFCO is actually short for Local Agency Formation Commission. I think it's important to first start with why they're in existence, right? LAFCOs have essentially these three main goals or missions for their organization. And the first is to discourage urban sprawl. The second is to preserve open space in prime agricultural lands. And the third and final goal is to promote orderly growth. And they were essentially formed back in 1963. They're political subdivisions of the state of California, and they are responsible for providing regional growth management services within all 58 counties of the state. So that means that every county has an assigned LAFCO to oversee their region. And LAFCOs are comprised of locally elected and appointed officials. They are tasked under statute, which the governing authority for LAFCOs is the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Local Government Reorganization Act of 2000. That's a mouthful, so it's commonly referred to as CKH. And according to this legislature, the commission essentially oversees and governs like the establishment and expansion of cities, towns, and special districts.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a nice way to like kind of sum it up. I think it's like concrete for people to think about, oh, the city annexed some property and the city got bigger. Or, Mountain House, which is the newest city in California that we just got to work on at RSG, the formation of that new city in San Joaquin County, creation of a new city or a special district that provides certain services. Fun fact about RSG, we've been doing this work for as long as I've been with the firm, which is 34 years right now. And we did a lot of work in South Orange County originally when we got started in this field, forming new cities, annexation of cities down and communities down that area. And our office was actually City Hall for the city of Lake Forest. So, and there was a while for several years that you could call our phone number and people still thought we were Lake Forest City Hall. It's kind of a crazy fun thing that happened during that time we were around. So it's been really a part of what we've been doing for a very long time. What's been less a part of what we've been doing, because it's a newer phenomenon, are these municipal service reviews. It sounds strange, so can you tell us about what a municipal service review is and why they're done?
Yeah, of course. So Of course, we love acronyms in government. So Municipal Service Reviews, or referred to as MSRs. Essentially, the MSR is an opportunity to kind of do a check-in on the local agencies that are under LAFCO's purview, so cities, districts, towns. And its goal is to assess essentially the performance of services from that agency within their specific service area. So we're looking at those two components, and it's a way to identify any ways to either enhance efficiency of the service delivery, identify any areas of concern, as well as any ways that there can be some consolidating or cooperation or enhanced collaboration essentially between service providers in the region. So yeah, it serves as this main check-in to inform the commission of what's going on in the region and how these agencies are providing their services and if they can be improved.
Right. And getting back to the core principles of why LAFCOs exist, right? Those three core principles you mentioned. And public agencies, for people who are like cities, for example, have to do reporting of all types of things. Budgets and work programs get adopted every year, every 2 years in some cases. They do annual reports. They have to file certain reports for grant programs that they receive funding for. I think what's unique about this type of reporting is that, or review in this case, is that it's done by a third party, an outside party, technically, LAFCO, on that agency. And in some ways, I guess that kind of can be an issue, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a little bit. But maybe we could talk about first how do LAFCOs ensure that these MSRs are really being useful and helpful? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in my experience, at San Diego County LAFCO, the MSRs there I've really viewed them as this evolving document. And I mean evolving in the fact that throughout time it's been changed. Sure, the MSR has always remained relevant to identifying water or assessing water services, fire services, and looking at financials, governance, and those things. So those key factors are always considered, but each LAFCO at its discretion and whatever resources they have available to them can enhance on those analysis and looking at certain services that might be more important to that region, right? And I think that's how it remains relevant to the regional needs, community needs, right. As well as timely, right? We want to make sure that the MSRs remain up to date and are reflecting what needs to be done in the area. And, and just using as an example, when we're looking at Alameda, that was just a project I assisted Monroe with, who's a colleague of ours. And that MSR, the commission really had a focus on looking into broadband services being provided in the region. And so that was an area that MSR allowed Monroe and the team to kind of dive deeper into. And so there's the MSR can really be a tool in which we can, or the agency can really look into where the region is focusing on in services. So I think that's a big thing. And then of course, just making sure that, you're collaborating with the agencies involved to get those little nuances that maybe aren't relevant in the files, right, that you're looking at. So.
And I think that kind of gets to some of the challenges of doing this kind of work that we run into at RSG, and even LAFCOs who do this kind of stuff themselves. What are some of the things that we typically encounter, and maybe how do we try to work around that?
Yeah, I think in the forefront of my mind, I know the biggest challenge that I have encountered when doing an MSR, and I think this might be applicable for RSG as well and LAFCOs in general, is this sense of getting the agency's buy-in. I mean that in a way that, we've talked about LAFCO being this obscure agency. So when I would go out and introduce the topic to, say, a city council or a district board and saying, hey, we're performing this municipal service review, we're a LAFCO, a lot of them would just be like, who's LAFCO? What? I've never heard of LAFCO. And so that alone can be a challenge, because if there's not this already established relationship, then they're kind of like, well, why do you want to know all of our stuff? What's going on? So
Right.
I think that's a challenge in that fact. And
Totally
then,
understandable from their perspective. I mean, they're so accustomed to self-reporting so many of their things, and this is like someone who be reported on them, and it's a unique space to be in that way. So
yeah, and they think we're airing out their laundry, or and so there's that issue of unresponsiveness that is at play. So I think those are probably the biggest challenges that I've encountered.
Yeah, which ultimately doesn't really serve them. I mean, we can certainly rely on public documents and stuff, but being able to have conversations with their key staff and management team on these issues can help bring color and perspective to things that might show up in an audit financial statement or what have you. And so I think it's important for us to have that dialogue. And I love how when you were in San Diego LAFCO, you guys went out and did those kinds of interviews in advance to kind of introduce people and try to like calm them kind of going into that process. I think that's a brilliant idea. How would so we've talked about what MSRs are. There's a purpose to them, right? Ultimately, and so like, what is the purpose of an MSR? In how it's being used by a LAFCO in terms of thinking about like the long-term planning, which is a big role for LAFCOs as a purpose.
Yeah, so these MSRs, the goal here is to make sure that there's good information being put into them to essentially help the commission make informed decisions. And this is with respect to those boundary changes or sphere of influence amendments. And that indirectly contributes to the long-term planning aspect of how these MSRs regionally help cities and the county plan accordingly, because a sphere of influence is essentially the geographical area in which the agency has the authority to provide their services in. And that kind of dictates development, right? Like where can they build upon and, or any type of development. And so that's how it can contribute to the long-term planning. And then seeing what the MSR can do in real life, making changes. An example in my mind is when I started at LAFCO, there was a MSR done for the Ramona region, and it happened maybe 2 years before I joined. And one of the first annexation or reorganization projects that came across my desk was this reorganization involving Ramona Municipal Water District. And within that MSR completed for that region, it was recommended that the Municipal Water District consolidate its fire protection and emergency medical services. And so, and they were...
So they had those, that water district was providing not only water services, but they're providing fire.
Exactly.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so it was like they're finding a purview of services there. And LAFCO at the time saw fit through that MSR. I think there was identification of ways to enhance the level of services, and that would be transferring them to the San Diego County Fire Protection District. And so while that was a recommendation, it actually matured into an actual change of organization. And so Ramona filed for that change to divest those services and transfer them to the San Diego Fire Protection District. And from what I know, services have been enhanced as a result of that. So that's some real change on what these MSRs can essentially do.
Yeah. And that's in line with some trends that we're noticing, right? Around changes in not only agencies, but changes with MSRs, because, these, should be prepared, as frequently as every 5 years, for agencies. And in a time that we've been working on these, we've noticed that. So I guess from your perspective, how have these MSRs evolved and changed over time in different areas of California?
So speaking trends-wise, I think the more in one area is just this term of growth and accommodating that growth within regions, especially regions that are experiencing or are anticipating exponential growth. I think a challenge or a trend for LAFCO is continually seeing more complex boundary changes that may conflict with those three goals. Like there might be a change that's not going to preserve open space or prime agricultural lands. There could be a conflict there. So I think in terms for LAFCO now and going forward, that's going to be more apparent. And then that's more of a LAFCO type of trend. But when we're thinking about the MSRs themselves, I would have to say that, their legislature right now makes this one size fit all for the agencies, and I'm sure you know that it doesn't make this distinction of agencies' size, resources, like the activity going on in that region. San Diego LAFCO, for example, gets over 30 applications a year for boundary changes, whereas someone up north in a smaller county, maybe Placer, or, I'm just throwing that out there as an example, they might only see one application a year.
Right.
But the MSRs are requiring every 5 years to prepare that.
Right.
And then I know you've worked with LA LAFCO, and I think they have like 100.
Yeah, I mean, almost 200 different agencies. Something over like 80 special districts and about 90 different cities, and doing a comprehensive review on every one of those agencies every 5 years at the most frequent or as needed. In some cases, that just is impossible to do. I mean, this is another unfunded mandate, right? That it's a necessary thing. It makes sense that the legislature has asked LAFCOs to take this on, but it came with no money to LAFCOs to do this, right? That's what we call an unfunded mandate. So, so in some cases, each agency has to sit there and figure out each commission, I should say, has to think about what's the right way to go in their jurisdiction. If you're a suburban area and you've got a reasonable number of agencies, doing them, periodically is maybe a little bit easier to do because you've got enough agencies to pay your LAFCO fees to help you pay for their production of this stuff. But if you're a rural agency and you might not even have enough fees to have any staff.
Exactly.
We know of those situations already right now that it's a planning director that's essentially the LAFCO executive director, and they're wearing two different hats. Yeah. How are they possibly going to have enough time to do it? And you use the example of LA that you brought up. Yeah, I don't think that it's realistic for them to do that. So as a result, everybody's really having to do it a little differently, and all working off the same sort of standards of what the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act tells us, but trying to do it in a different way. How would you kind of talk about some of the projects that you've worked on since you've been at RSG? I know we've been doing quite a few MSRs. I know maybe you talk about some of the ones that we're doing right now for the audience that's watching.
Yeah, of course. So one that's a recent kickoff that we're getting started on is for Placer County LAFCO. And, this is just speaking to how different each LAFCO is and the way that they approach the MSRs. And so for this one, it's literally a single utility district, municipal utility district that we're reviewing for the MSR. So I think this is going to be a unique and fun project because given it's one district, I think we can analyze it a little more closely and enhance it as, our client sees fit, and depending on resources available, certainly. And I think one of the cool things is that annexation, it's a reorganization that we're working on for the town of Yountville. And so it's awesome that having made the transition from San Diego LAFCO to RSG, I still get to continue the work with LAFCO, and now on a broader scale. So where I'm doing municipal service reviews for multitudes of LAFCOs versus one. And then also being on the flip side of helping with the annexation or reorganization application.
Right.
Seeing that side of it versus getting the completed application and, reviewing and getting it to the commission. So I think that's some cool projects that I'm really looking forward to. And yeah, it's exciting, honestly.
Well, it's exciting to have you here. I mean, Carol, you've been with us for a few months now, and I'm grateful for you to join today and share some of your thoughts and your background, your expertise in this area. If anyone's ever interested in joining RSG and joining Carol as another member of the team, you can go to our website at rsgsolutions.com and check us out and find out if this is a type of work you're interested in doing. We would love to talk to you about that. And I'm going to thank you again for joining us today and joining us in RSG Insider. We'll see you next time on our podcast series.